Obviously, it's incredibly serious, this issue about safety. And on page 4, you set out, and you do note, that the training required for licensed aircraft maintenance engineers is the same in each country. Wages tend to be in the same range. But then you identified that the major difference between Australian facilities and those overseas is the number of lanes that circulate within a maintenance workforce.
Yes.
So that's what brought it home to me, that must be very serious. So could you expand on that, like what in terms of numbers and what this means?
Yeah, so in a Qantas heavy maintenance facility in Australia, we've traditionally seen one licensed aircraft engineer will be undertaking his own work alongside 2 unlicensed aircraft engineers, and the licensed engineer will have to certify for the work of those other 2 people and check their work. In facilities in Hong Kong, the typical ratios are 1 licensed aircraft engineer for 8 unlicensed aircraft engineers. In Singapore, 1 to 11, and in the Philippines, 1 to 22. So what that means is the person who is licensed, the more people that he has to supervise for, will not be able to necessarily check their work as well as someone who was only checking for 2 other people.
So is it those figures and that problem that obviously the LAMES engineers would, the licensed aircraft maintenance engineers would have in managing that number of unlicensed? Is that the basis of the issues that you've raised about Singapore?
Yeah, that is probably part of the reason why mistakes get made up there. It's not, as Senator Edwards suggested, some mindset that we have against people in Asia. It's the way that they go to make themselves cheaper, and that's by use of less qualified people in those facilities to undertake the work.
So that's when it's inadequate and therefore it becomes dangerous. Is that how we would see it?
We say it's dangerous. We've provided plenty of examples of things that have gone wrong in Asian facilities on Qantas aircraft that would substantiate that.
Right, so it's you've clarified very importantly, because of those earlier comments, that it's about those ratios between licensed and unlicensed. There's the root cause that we have here that goes to the heart of safety issues.
Yeah, that's correct, yeah.
So then also in your submission, I was interested when you talked about that your association, this is on page 5, was prohibited from submitting an audit report. This is again within your section about Singapore, and that you talked about about the access to the parties to the proceedings was prohibited from public disclosure. Now,
yep.
If I understood correctly, you were allowed to view it, but it was not released publicly. Is that what happened with this report?
We already had the document before the Freedom of Information application, because it was captured in a larger or wider group of documents. So we have the document outside of that realm, but we read the court orders yesterday, and the court orders made it clear the people who can be given public access to that. I know we've got parliamentary privilege here, and we may have been able to submit it, but we just didn't want to run the risk. So we have attached an earlier quality assurance report from Qantas. We've made reference to that one, but we haven't attached it. You guys could probably seek that yourselves.
And who drew up the original document, please?
The original document was a report drawn up by Qantas's own quality assurance department that made references to many mistakes that were undertaken in Singaporean facilities, and the final recommendation on aircraft OJQ, the one that we can't release but I believe you'll be able to gain access to, has Qantas clearly indicating that they should seriously reconsider whether they use that facility ever again.
Last question, Senator Rhiannon.
Thank you, Chair. And could you just comment on the role of CASA in this? Because it seemed as though they may have been unwilling to follow through on this, which again is very concerning.
We find it very difficult and frustrating to deal with CASA. When we raise an issue with them, they tend to take years to resolve it, even if it does get resolved. And in the case of these...
Seriously, years?
Yeah, years. Yeah. In the case of these 2 findings, Qantas got their own quality assurance department up there monitoring aircraft as they're being inspected, and they find all of these problems that have gone wrong. At the same time, CASA have gone in there and given it a clean bill of health. They couldn't find anything wrong. So now CASA have a new arrangement with Singapore where they will no longer require to go up there and certify the Singaporean facility, so they won't even be there at all.
Okay, thank you. Senator Xenophon.
Thank you, Chair. Further to your answer, Mr Convenis, so you're saying that the level of ratio of licensed aircraft engineers to those who aren't licensed in Australia is about 1 to 2, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
And you're saying in other countries where the work is carried out that the ratio is much higher?
Yeah, the ratio is much higher and it varies between different facilities.
Okay, so there's no, just to make this clear, there's no question as to the capability of other countries to undertake aircraft servicing. You're saying it's the level of oversight and regulatory.
Yeah. I've stated in our submission that the training for the licensed aircraft engineers in Asia is equal to ours. We have absolutely no problem. In fact, I've got a lot of very good friends up there working on aircraft. That's not the issue. The issue is the amount of unlicensed people that work within that mix.
Okay, so
licensed people sign off on it, don't they?
Yeah, they do. Yeah, the licensed people are meant to check the work and certify for the unlicensed people, and the more people that you have to check, the less supervision and oversight you can provide to those people.
But why would a professional, one of your friends,
Yep.
sign off if he
Chair,
doesn't?
I thought I had to call, or Deputy Chair.
Well, it was on the same theme. I will come back there. I will come back there.
Senator Xenophon has an election.
Senator Xenophon.
Sorry, I just want to just pursue this. I won't be long. You're saying that since 2012, Australian licensed aircraft engineers don't actually check the work that is done overseas, that there's no longer, there used to be, but there no longer is that level of supervision from overseas.
Yeah, the 6 aircraft engineers that would traditionally go with an aircraft didn't certify and give full supervision to the people. They would generally be there in a management capacity as general oversight, and they would pick up on anything that was being undertaken that would be a maintenance practice that wouldn't be carried out here at home.
Okay. So Senator Back said, I think quite rightly, that you've made a number of serious allegations in this submission, and they are, based on your submission. Are you able to provide us with as much backup information as possible? You've given some appendices, but can you provide that to the committee?
Absolutely. There's 100 pages of appendices already that substantiates nearly everything within our submission. Right. So if there's anything that the senators require after. And
finally, you make reference at the bottom of page 5 of your submission to a case before the Administrative Appeals Tribunal in an FOI application of Reeve, Astor and McKinnon against the Civil Aviation Safety Authority 2010 case. You're saying that there was prohibited public disclosure or publication of the audit report, and that was a Qantas Quality Assurance audit report. Okay. So you're suggesting to the committee that if we obtain that even on a confidential basis, that might be of use to us?
Yes, it will help you certainly to substantiate some of the comments that we've made in relation to the check on VHOJ.
Well, that's a matter for the committee, but thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Senator Xenophon.
Can I just follow up on, look, you know, if you read your report, it is very, very concerning. What I would do would be give you a report to Qantas and get them to give their response, and then the committee can hear both sides of the argument and may come to some conclusions. To do that, perhaps you could email to the Secretary this so that Qantas can just interpose on where you've said things. Sure. I'll only be asking Qantas to comment on those factual things, not on opinions, but on factual things. But the only other question I will have because of time, are you now suggesting that CASA is not doing its job, and why? I mean, are you suggesting CASA's not doing its job?
In my opinion, CASA are nothing more than another arm of Qantas's Industrial Relations Department. I have a very dim view on CASA's oversight of maintenance in this country and outside of Australia. I think they act in line with everything that Qantas wants them to do.
Well, they're not an arm of Qantas, they're an arm of the federal government and of
Well, maybe the federal government should pull them in and make sure that they're giving proper oversight to maintenance facilities here and offshore.
Well, I know this is a criticism of the last government who had 6 years to do that, but I must say I'll talk to Mr Truss to make sure that Qantas, that CASA aren't an arm of Qantas or anyone else, but an independent authority. So you have no confidence in CASA at all?
No, we do not have confidence in CASA to provide effective oversight of maintenance.
And you think that the reason that they are failing in the duty that the Australian people and through their government have given them is because they're in the pay, so to speak, colloquially, of Qantas?
I think they've been a victim of corporate capture. They've gotten too close to the airline They're all, well, I can't say all, of course, that would be incorrect. A lot of them are friends with people who work for Qantas, and I just think that corporate capture, Stockholm Syndrome, whatever you want to call it, I think CASA is something.
And does that apply to Virgin as well, or is it related only to Qantas?
I don't know how close they are to Virgin. I haven't had too many indications that would be the case there, but I do know that they've come out pretty hard against airlines like Tiger and so on, and grounded Tiger for things that are far less than what we've seen at Qantas.
Okay, and look, and I'm sure Senator Back will follow this up, but Singapore is no longer a cheap labour country. I mean, yeah. I think it's more expensive than Australia these days.
Yeah.
You're just saying that although they don't, airlines using their maintenance facilities don't get it cheaper as in a wage structure, they do because they economise on the numbers and cut corners in their assessments.
Yes, and if I could simplify it for you, with a licensed aircraft engineer, they might earn X amount of dollars, and an unlicensed person may earn half that much. Half is about the normal mix wherever you go. So the more licensed people you have, the more your wages bill is going to be. But also the more licensed people you have, the more work you can get through because they're more experienced.
And you're suggesting that professional, qualified, honest engineers go home at night thinking, I'm really prostituted my calling by signing off on that when I really haven't had time to check it, but if a plane goes down, it's bad luck. You're saying that's what they do?
Well, that's not what aircraft engineers think of when they go home, but...
that was your contention. You said that they sign off on what you're claiming are inferior work practices in other countries.
Yeah, if you're asking me more specifically about Asian facilities?
Yeah, well, that's the ones that you've spoken about.
Yeah, sure, yeah. In Asia, the aircraft engineers are generally all on contracts, and they know if they don't play ball